With the onset of the recent March balance update, it has brought some pretty drastic changes to this meta. Cards such as Barbarians have suddenly become super meta, while others such as Battle Ram didn't fare so well. And with the 20-win challenge coming up pretty soon, I thought it would be the perfect time to showcase some of the top decks to use and master. These decks are all tier 1 decks in the meta, and once mastered, will allow you to absolutely dominate the meta. So, without further ado, let's get right into the list. Number 1. Lava Hound Clone. The new clone meta at its finest with the Lava Hound. Now with this deck, you want to play semi-aggressively, as in it's okay sometimes to play the Lava Hound in single elixir time. Start off the match with a small play such as bats in the back, then build up a push with the Lava Hound. However, be careful not to give your opponents too much spell value. In fact, oftentimes I'll only support my Lava Hound with a singular flying machine. This way, we can often bait out the opponent's tornado, poison, or fireball, which then freezes up to use the clone spell. Now, clone can also be used on defense as well if you time it just right. The Lumberjack is also another lethal aspect of this deck, not only being the big tank killer, but also with the death effect raging up all your units on both offense and defense. Now, the one big issue with this deck is that there isn't really a big spell or much ground defense at all, so it is rather weak to decks such as Expo. However, as long as you play smart, you should be able to win most matchups. Number 2. Pekka Ram. Well, the Pekka just never dies, does she? Although once seen in Battle Ram decks, she is now seen in a Ram Rider variation with the Baby Dragon. This deck is a control deck, meaning that you make positive elixir trades on defense to counter push. However, it also has a bit of a rushy feel to it, so feel free to rush opposite lane if your opponent makes a big commitment. Baby Dragon will be the bulk of your air defense, and the triple spell aspect makes bait an extremely easy matchup. Pekka obviously is another solid unit for defense, but against cheaper cycle decks, you might want to consider playing the Pekka more like a beatdown in the back, as you can see in the replay right there. Finally, another huge point people often forget is to use the Ram Rider on defense. Her snare ability is super duper useful on defense and also offers so much counter push value. Number 3. 2.9 Expo. And of course, with a 4% health boost, the Expo is back in the meta. Now, I know a lot of you in the comments have been asking why this tiny buff brought such a surge in Expo usage, but hear me out. First things first, obviously Barb Barrel was nerfed, but keep this in mind. Expo is a chip cycle deck, and considering the fact that the Expo only needs to be locked onto a tower for about 25 seconds to take it down, any HP buff would make a huge difference in this deck's effectiveness. But anyways, back onto the topic. This deck is a super fast deck. Start off the match passively, just cycling all of your cheap cards until your opponent makes a move, constantly making sure to get chip damage onto the tower. If they play a big tank in the back, Expo opposite lane. Now, something that is extremely underrated in this deck is the power of the defensive Expo. Defensive Expos are actually super duper effective and are almost essential to win certain matchups such as the Pekka one you see in the background, or drawing against matchups such as Royal Giant. Number 4. Royal Giant Lightning. Speaking of the Royal Giant, he is another top tier deck in the meta. Not only because he does quite well against Expo, but also because he matches up well against a ton of other meta decks. Now with this deck, you obviously want to start the match with a Center Plant Furnace, or just wait for your opponent to make the first move if it's not in hand. Again, similar to the Pekka deck, against cheaper decks, you want to play the Royal Giant more so in the back, like a beatdown deck, and against heavier decks, you want to play more Royal Giants up front. Pretty much all of your units are defensive, may that be the Baby Dragon, the Mega Minion, the E-Wiz, or the Guards, and you can cover pretty much any defense with these cards. Lightning is also a super unique spell in this meta, as it's only seen in Royal Giant decks, and this spell, both on offense and defense, can gain insane value with all of the mid-health units and defensive buildings running around. Number 5. Royal Hogs. Oh boy, with the recent Barbarian rework, those pesky barbs are finally seeing some action in their original form, in an insane Fireball bait deck. I mean, just look at this deck. 3 Fireball bait cards all super annoying, packed into the exact same deck. So I think the point of this deck is pretty obvious, you know, they use the fireball on one unit, they obviously won't have it for the other two. Again, this deck is one where you generally wait for your opponent to make the first big move, so you know, cycling something small in the back at the start of the match never hurts. Barbarians actually, you know, do more DPS than a minion horde, so they are super effective defenders, and so are the Goblin Gang, Bats, and Flying Machine, which can get so much value if left ignored. Now, this deck is also a split lane deck as well, so sometimes you can split your Barbarians and split your Royal Hogs, making for an insanely tough dual lane push for your opponents to defend. So there we go. 5 decks that absolutely dominate in this meta. Now, one important thing to note is that a solid, well-rounded deck will only take you so far. You have to master the deck, learn all the game plans for different matchups, and know the most important interactions in your deck to actually succeed. Because oftentimes, it's the player, not the deck. Hopefully this video, gave you a deck that you might be interested to picking up and mastering. But unfortunately, guys, that's all I've got time for in today's video. If you enjoyed, please leave a like down below, as well as a subscription to my channel. And as always, this is Legendaray, and I'm signing off. See you guys next time.